Greetings, colleagues. I'm Paul Colby, and I am heavily stressed of late. Along with my trio of investigators, I usually bring you the stories behind the stories behind the stories on a regular basis, even when it's painful. And usually we come to you from a cozy studio in Big H, but not this time. Now, we are still among you, although we are at undisclosed locations. And when I say undisclosed, that's exactly what I mean. You know, this all happened so fast, it's kind of like a blur. We were assembling data for the new show, so we always do. So we were stitching together the bits and pieces to understand the machinations of the fake news cartel. And I brought my people to Houston to discuss the shit that was going down. It soon became obvious that certain forces were attempting to fence us in to keep us from reaching you. So we went undercover. Actually, I should say that we went underground. And I recorded this narrative to let you know what we found out. My investigators, they're still down here with me, and I'm going to reveal what is in our files and what we were going to share with you on the next episode of my compelling news program, which comes to you, of course, from my little white library. You know me, but let's look at the investigators who came with me. First is Sid Rock. He currently heads the Fast Food Natural Nutrient Removal Advisory Panel in Washington. He's famous for analyzing why some of today's young people are smoking their cell phones. That's something I've often wondered about. He's also known for contributing to a very timely and important book on the worship of microbes. Just so that we dot our I's and split our T's, he is spiritual, not religious. I'm talking about Sid. And lately he's been teaching meditation classes, showing people how to communicate with the corn prophet, whose words of wisdom have brightened many lives. My next investigator is Ruthless Lee. She is the director of the Rhino Sighting Project at Trump World Amusement Park in Sarasota, and she's contributed recipes to the very popular book Cooking with Stuffed Animals. She recently launched Clear and Present Stranger, which is a dating site for people with criminal records, and she is a current directing manager for the corporation Bigley. Their motto, "Never seen anything like it," is a motto which is invoked by fools all around the world. Finally, there is Albatross. Now, Al is a gadget designer. His work has captured the imaginations of several colorful mammals that he is now holding for ransom. About 20 years ago, Al invented Instant Air, a just add water product, and in later years, and by popular demand, he invented Instant Water, which is much appreciated in America's food deserts. He also maintains a website, a how-to, which includes valuable tips like the proper way to open a can of worms. Like the Banana Republicans and their boy leader, who is apparently now suffering from Kimmel derangement syndrome. Things haven't been going well for him lately, in large part because some of his officers are drunk with power. Among them, I would include Pam Bondi, who has become notorious for yelling at members of Congress. Her response to questions about the past behavior of the Toga Yoga kid have involved a recitation of numbers I'm not sure she understands. By the way, Al tells me that she is now taking accordion lessons as a backup in case she gets fired like Kristi Noem did. Well, Kristi, as you know, has a big jet and a big bed in the big jet. The president has said repeatedly, no pizza on the bed, just in Pizzagate. And so he got tired of paying for her guards, and he decided he would give her a new position. Now, that position, I think he just invented it on the spot. She's going to be the emissary to the Vatican outreach outfit. I'm not sure what that is. Probably has something to do with South African immigrants. Melania's new movie is also irritating the big boy since it didn't even get an Oscar nomination, even if it's in English. Sid tells me that they were passing out partially smoke-damaged cell phones at the debut. How about that? There are scandals involving presidential agencies. For example, ICE. It's been said that the recruitment standards for ICE have been lowered, and Ruth brought me a document that pretty much confirms that. But just to be very clear about the subject, we've also decided to report that giant ICE budget is mostly for janitorial services, you see, keeping the offices clean. And the Supreme Court recently told Trump to clean up his act. They said no to his tariffs on goods, and then the president responded by saying that the tariffs were all on bads. Bad press, looks like. So Trump's sometimes ally Jeff Bezos fired a bunch of reporters at the Washington Post. He replaced them with scrambled eggs. He thought they would do a better story for the president. Of course, they kept reporting on, let's call it affordability. The president, however, thought that the issue was about Fordability. In other words, Ford being in a duel with General Motors. And Yoga Toga said he had to abandon his old friend General Motors to defend Ford, but Al told me he talked to General Motors, who doesn't remember ever meeting the chief executive, but is worried about the giant lizards attacking office buildings in D.C. and the smaller lizards disrupting the opening of the president's new whites-only nightclub, and the ones invading the White House just before the State of the Union address, which the president knew would have to be a real barn burner so that he could recover popularity and redirect the narrative. Now, it came out looking sort of like a game show. It wasn't clear what the prize was, but aides told the president, we can't talk about booby prizes because there's already too much talk about that. So he talked about winning the Cold War and becoming the hottest country in the world, which I guess everybody already knew if you've looked outside and been at the beach. He also talked about windmill restrictions, and these weren't unexpected. Of course, he didn't mention, says my friend Sid, anything about microbe pollution or dietary insufficiency. He talked about a proposed 29th Amendment to the Constitution, but I thought we only had 27. Ruth says she knows what that secret 28th Amendment is, but she can't tell me just yet. Well, there are also directives about ICE. There's not going to be any more attacks on blue cities without presidential approval. That's news, isn't it? And there's the possibility of body cams for ICE agents, but they are really boot cams. Now, Al told me that he actually designed boot cams early on when he was trekking up the anthills in Dallas, which is where, of course, Mr. Yoga Toga announced that he's going to be participating in March Madness festivities since he's always mad. One reason he's mad is because of the continuing release of those pesky Epstein files, even though the president says he's never been to that Virgin Island 8 times. Of course, Mr. Trump has been at war with the release of those files from the very beginning. But now that they are actually being released, he's trying to put the focus on others. For example, there are pictures of Bill Clinton, but what we have seen so far only proves that President Clinton was arguing with the waitstaff about the way that the cucumbers were being sliced. More or less, the president's own people are causing problems, like Howard Lutnick and his boat ride excursions, and the very, very famous Ghislaine Maxwell, who is now on a lecture tour, or maybe it's a stand-up comedy routine, talking about yoga for prisoners. Now, the release of files has been sluggish, partly because DOJ says some of the documents have peanut butter stains, so they can't be released. As for emails, it appears that some are being redacted to protect the names, maybe of predators, and it looks like some are not being as carefully looked at. All right, so there is that issue. In addition, while we're on the subject of redactions, the DOJ earlier said that those files that had pictures of horses would be redacted, and we figured that meant the horses would be redacted, but it turns out some of the men in those pictures are also being redacted. Since the war on the Epstein files wasn't going his way, the president decided we need a real war, or maybe it's just an excursion. Of course, kick-ass wars usually have groovy code names. Sometimes they hit a little bit too close to home. Not only that, sometimes old movies can hit a little bit too close to home. In this war, you already have issues about whether some of our weapons are for sale on eBay, and issues about payments to some guy who only goes by a code name. I'm not sure who he is, but the checks were big money. And then, of course, you have the usual mistakes, which are the president's modus operandi. And even though there is not really a state of Hormuz, there are elevated gas prices. And this does not bode well for the banana Republicans as the midterm elections are coming into focus. Already we're seeing efforts to rewrite the history of the 2020 election, and then we are seeing efforts to change the rules of the road before the next balloting begins. For example, new rules in some states are designed to keep voters from voting, and other rules are designed to give the opportunity to some individuals to vote more than one time. It's really obvious that even in Texas, Republicans are worried that they can't hold on to their seats or whatever it is they're holding on to. Even so, some are clinging to the mobster tales, as others are slinging mud, and I mean lots of it. I have to admit it's entertaining, and my investigators tell me that the younger folk think it's somehow normal. After all, they grew up with a different group of dolls than we did. So I guess we'll be back in the near future to let you know more of what we have found out about what's going down.